Some people believe the worst thing in life is dying. I used to believe that too, until I realized there's something even crueler. Staying alive after your soul has been murdered. Breathing, smiling, walking while inside. Everything that made you human has been crushed. You know what's worse than death? It's having your happiest memories twisted into nightmares. It's when the arms that rocked you to sleep are the same ones that violated your body. It's discovering that the person everyone admired, the man you trusted most, was the monster behind your lifelong pain. My name is Evelyn May Carter, though in this little patch of Southern Virginia, most folks just call me Granny May. I'm 69 years old. I've earned every wrinkle on this face and every ache in this heart. But today, I'm not here to share recipes or memories from simpler times. I'm here to tell you the story I buried for nearly 5 decades. Before I begin, if you're a mother, grandmother, or someone raising children with your whole heart, tell me in the comments how many kids and grandbabies you've raised. Let's fill this page with our strength. And if my story touches you, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on that bell. Every like and comment is a little piece of healing for me. Let me take you back. I was born and raised in Oak Hollow, a small town where the roads were dusty and life was predictable. My parents, Walter and Lillian, worked hard, Daddy in the lumber mill and Mama raising 5 wild children. We didn't have much, but we had love, or so I thought. But there was one figure who towered above all others in our family, my grandfather, Ezekiel Carter, known across Oak Hollow as the judge. He wasn't a real judge, not legally. But folks called him that out of respect. He was powerful, rich in land and influence. He had the biggest farmhouse, the loudest voice at church, and the final say in every family decision. To me, he was a giant of a man, with silver-streaked hair, polished boots, and a gravelly voice that always seemed wise. He'd pull me into his lap on the porch swing and tell me stories of his youth, of how he built our family's name from nothing. And every time, without fail, he'd call me his brightest star. I clung to those words. They made me feel chosen. When I turned 15, Grandpa Ezekiel threw me a birthday party with a bonfire and bluegrass band. When I graduated high school, he gave me a necklace that had belonged to my great-grandmother, Elvira. Everyone said I was his favorite, and I believed it. He encouraged me to study, pushed me to take typing classes and read books, when most girls my age were expected to marry young. He told me I'd be the first woman in our family to work in an office, maybe even become a writer. It was during one of those trips into town that I met Thomas Dean, a sweet, humble boy who worked as a clerk at the county registrar's office. He wasn't rich. He didn't own land. But he had ambition, respect, and a kind heart. When I told my grandfather about Thomas, he asked to meet him alone. Thomas came to the farmhouse wearing his best shirt, nervous as a cat. After their talk, Grandpa Ezekiel patted him on the back and said, "You've got my blessing, son. Take care of my star." And with those words, I was sure I had everything I ever wanted. Our engagement lasted 2 years. Grandpa insisted the wedding would be the grandest Oak Hollow had ever seen. And he delivered on every promise. The ceremony was held on his land, under a willow tree that had stood for 100 years. The yard was lit with lanterns. Musicians played until dawn. The cake had 7 layers. My dress, sewn by a seamstress from Charleston, was white lace with pearl buttons and a cathedral-length veil. That morning, my mother helped me dress while my sisters fussed over my hair. "You look like a queen," Mama whispered. "You're making history, baby," my father said, voice cracking. "And my grandfather?" He cried. I had never seen him cry before. He gave a speech that evening, just before dinner was served. He stood on a small stage and, with that booming voice, said to everyone, "This girl here, this star of mine, has been the light of my life since the day she was born." People clapped. Some cried. Even Thomas looked touched. I felt like I had stepped into a fairy tale. After the dancing began, Grandpa pulled me aside with 2 glasses of champagne. "To us," he said, offering me a drink. "This bottle's been waiting for your wedding day." I'd never had anything stronger than apple cider, but I trusted him. Of course I did. I drank. The taste was strange, bitter, heavy, but I smiled through it. He kissed my forehead and returned me to Thomas. That's when the night turned. Within minutes, the room spun. My legs were heavy. My vision blurred. "I think I need to sit," I whispered. Thomas helped me, concerned. But before we could find a chair, Grandpa returned. "She needs to lie down," he said. "I'll take her to the back guest room. It's quiet there." No one questioned him. Why would they? This was Ezekiel Carter, the man who built our family. He carried me down the hall. My arms and legs were jelly. My head pounded. He opened a guest room, the one I used to sleep in as a child, and gently placed me on the bed. "Rest," he said, tucking me in. "Grandpa's here." And then, I heard it. The click of the door locking. "Grandpa?" I slurred, half aware. "Why'd you lock the door?" "So you can rest, sweetheart," he whispered. "So nobody disturbs us." That's when the fog started to clear, just enough for dread to creep in. But my body wouldn't move. And my mind was screaming. The sound of that lock turning is something I'll never forget. It was a quiet click, nothing dramatic, but it sliced through the fog in my mind like a knife. My body was limp, my vision swirling, and yet some part of me, deep, instinctual, knew I wasn't safe anymore. I tried to speak. My lips barely moved. "Grandpa, why'd you lock?" "Hush now," he whispered, drawing the curtains closed with one hand. "You need to rest." His voice sounded gentle, familiar, but there was a strange current beneath it, a sharpness I'd never heard before. He moved around the room slowly, deliberately. He straightened a photo frame on the dresser, adjusted the lamp, then turned to face me, his silhouette backlit by the fading sun through the curtain. I tried to move, to sit up. My arms felt like they were tied down with bricks. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat beside me. "I waited for this moment," he said softly, brushing a piece of hair from my cheek. "Waited years. You don't even know how special you are, May. How long I've loved you this way." His words were syrupy, meant to sound sweet, but they dripped with rot. "No," I whispered. "At least, I think I did." The sound that came from my mouth was more breath than voice. "You always made me feel young again," he said, ignoring me. "Even when you were a little girl, you lit up the room. Everyone said you had my spirit. That fire." I tried to scream. Nothing came out. He stood up, towering over me. My heart pounded against my ribs. "Do you know how much it hurt?" he continued, "watching you grow up and knowing I had to wait." His hands, those hands that once handed me storybooks and laced up my shoes, reached for the sash of my wedding dress. I tried again. My body refused. The drug, whatever it was, had stolen everything except my terror. "This will stay between us," he whispered, undoing the sash with careful fingers. "You're a woman now. A wife. This is nothing new for married folk." Tears spilled from the corners of my eyes and onto the pillow. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even close my legs. I was trapped in my own skin. And he was right there, violating everything I was, everything I had believed. The lace of my dress scratched against my skin as he peeled it back. He hummed a slow, haunting hymn as he touched me. It was the hymn we used to sing in church when I sat beside him, proud to be his little girl. I shut my eyes. I begged God to take me. If death was mercy, then I was praying for it. Somewhere far away, the party continued. I could still hear the music, muffled, distant. People were dancing, laughing, celebrating my wedding. No one knew I was being destroyed in the quiet of this room. Then suddenly, a voice, faint, but there. May, baby, are you here? Thomas, my husband. I tried to respond. My mouth barely moved. I whimpered. Grandpa froze, turned toward the door. His hands stopped moving. He muttered something under his breath and stepped away from the bed. Go back downstairs, he called out, voice calm. She's resting. She's not feeling well. But Thomas's footsteps came closer. Why's the door locked? I heard the doorknob rattle. A pause. She's resting, Grandpa said again, but this time his voice cracked. Another pause. The tension thickened. Then the key turned. Light flooded the room. I blinked rapidly, trying to focus. Thomas stepped inside, and for a moment, he just stared. I'll never forget the look on his face as his eyes took in the scene. Me, lying on the bed, dressed in disarray, tears streaking my cheeks. Grandpa, standing rigid by the dresser, hands trembling. What the hell is this? Thomas said. He stepped toward the bed. May, baby? I let out a faint sob. My body still wouldn't obey, but my eyes begged him. Thomas turned, his face transforming from confusion to rage. What did you do to her? Grandpa took a step back. Now, son, don't jump to conclusions. She's sick. I was just. You bastard, Thomas roared. He lunged, grabbed Grandpa by the collar, and slammed him against the dresser. The lamp crashed to the floor. The photo frame shattered. Grandpa cried out. I trusted you. Thomas screamed, throwing punches, wild, furious, righteous. You sick bastard. Other footsteps pounded the hallway. Voices rose in panic. The door swung open again. My father. My uncles. My mother. Gasps. Screams. Chaos. Thomas kept swinging. My father stood frozen, then turned to look at me on the bed. He went pale. Dear God, he whispered. My mother ran to my side, her trembling hands brushing my hair. My baby, what did he do to you? She cried. And finally, I could whisper. The drink. That was enough. My mother turned toward her father, my grandfather, with eyes that burned hotter than fire. You drugged my child? Voices erupted around the room, some shouting, others sobbing. And through the noise, a single voice rose clear and steady. Grandma Hattie, my grandfather's wife of 50 years, the one who had stood by his side through everything. She stepped into the room. Look at me. Then I looked at him, and said words that froze everyone in place. I knew. I always knew. The room went silent. Not from peace, but from shock. Every eye turned toward Grandma Hattie, the quiet matriarch who'd spent decades cooking Sunday dinners, smiling beside her husband in church pews, and keeping her secrets buried beneath perfect posture and pearls. I knew, she repeated. I always knew. The weight of her voice hit harder than any punch Thomas had thrown. My grandfather, bleeding from his lip, one eye already swollen, froze in place. His face turned pale, like the truth had just knocked the wind out of him. My father stepped forward, stunned. "Mama, what are you saying?" She didn't look at him. Her gaze was locked on the man she'd shared a bed with for half a century. "I knew what he was," she said, voice shaking but steady. "I knew what he did to your sisters, to my mother, and now to your daughter." The floor beneath my heart cracked. My father looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. "To Aunt Margaret?" he asked, his voice trembling. "To Aunt Liza?" Grandma Hattie nodded. "They were just girls," she whispered, eyes glassy. And I stayed quiet. I told myself it was better not to cause a scandal. Maybe it won't happen again. "Mama," my Uncle David cut in, "are you saying he hurt his own daughters?" "I'm saying," she said slowly, tears now spilling, "that he's been hurting this family for 2 generations. And I let it happen. I didn't stop him. I didn't protect any of you." My father backed away like he couldn't breathe. Thomas stood beside the door, still panting, fists clenched. Blood covered his knuckles. And me, still lying in that bed, barely able to sit upright, I felt the coldest kind of clarity settle in. This wasn't just about me. It never had been. This man, this predator, had haunted our bloodline for decades, all hidden under Sunday hats, family prayers, and the illusion of honor. My grandfather's voice finally returned. Weak, broken, yet still trying to hold on. "They're lying," he rasped. "All of them. This boy drugged her himself, and now he's blaming me. Hattie, tell them. Tell them you're confused. You know I'd never hurt Ellie. She's my star, my star." Hattie didn't move, didn't blink. "My mother," she said slowly, "stopped speaking after you touched her. Remember that? You told me she was just senile. But I saw her. After you left her room. I saw the bruises. The tears." My father stepped forward again, face red with rage and shame. "You've been lying to us since before I was born." "Son, don't call me that," he roared. The room erupted again. Shouting, crying, accusations, denials. People tried to hold my father back. Others pulled my grandfather toward a corner, trying to calm the chaos. Then, just as it felt like the room might explode, the sound of sirens cut through the air. Blue and red lights flickered through the windows. The police had arrived. 2 officers entered, one older, stern-faced and composed. The other, younger, wide-eyed and visibly uncomfortable. "Everybody calm down," barked the older officer. "What's going on here?" Thomas stepped forward first. "This man," he said, pointing at my grandfather, "drugged my wife and assaulted her. In that bed. On our wedding night." The older officer turned to my grandfather. His eyes softened, subtly. "Colonel Carter?" he asked, surprised. "What's all this?" My stomach dropped. Of course. The officer knew him. Everyone in town did. "I was just helping her rest," my grandfather said calmly, fixing his shirt collar. "She had too much champagne. This boy got the wrong idea." My mother, who had been quiet till then, stepped up to the officer. "My daughter was poisoned," she said firmly. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. Her wedding dress was torn. My husband and I raised her right. She wasn't drunk, she was drugged." The younger officer looked toward me. I gathered what little strength I had and tried to sit upright. My voice was still raspy. He locked the door," I whispered. "Said it was just to help me rest. But he touched me." I saw the younger officer's jaw clench. But the older one hesitated. "Colonel," he said, quietly, "is there any truth to this?" My grandfather straightened his back, now wearing that familiar smug expression that had fooled people for years. "I've served this town for 40 years," he said. "You know me, Harold. This family always had a flair for drama. That girl's been overly emotional since she was little. Ask anyone." That's when Grandma Hattie stepped forward. Her voice was low, but powerful. "I will testify," she said. "Under oath. I'll tell the court what he did to me. To my daughters. To her. I won't keep his secrets anymore." My grandfather's face was drained of color. "You wouldn't," he whispered. She stared at him with years of grief in her eyes. "I just did." The room quieted again. The younger officer turned to the older one. "Sir," he said, "we need to take him in." The older man paused, then finally nodded. "Mr. Carter," he said, stepping forward, "we're placing you under arrest pending investigation." The moment the cuffs clicked around my grandfather's wrists, the house, our whole family, shattered. He didn't fight, didn't cry, didn't beg. He just stood there, silent, as the mask he wore for decades finally fell to the ground. As they led him out, my father collapsed onto the nearest chair and put his head in his hands. My mother held me in her arms, brushing sweat from my brow. Thomas stayed at my side, holding my limp hand, whispering over and over, "You're safe now. He's gone. You're safe." But I wasn't. Not really. Because when a monster steals your innocence, no police car can take that pain away. Whispers ran faster than the wind in Oak Hollow. By the time the sun rose the next morning, half the county knew. The judge's granddaughter. Her wedding night. Her husband walked in. The police are leading Ezekiel Carter out in handcuffs. The colonel. The war hero. The church elder. People didn't know whether to believe it, or to bury it. Some stood in line at the bakery that Monday and whispered, "That poor girl. How will she ever recover?" Others lowered their voices and muttered, "That boy Thomas must have misunderstood. Ezekiel was a good man. Always has been." I wasn't the only one on trial. So was the truth. I spent the days after in a fog, not from champagne, but from the ache of betrayal and the flood of questions. I underwent medical tests at the city hospital. They found traces of chloroform in my blood. The bruises told their own story. Doctors, nurses, even a forensic specialist confirmed what I already knew deep in my bones. I had been drugged. I had been violated. Thomas stayed by my side every step of the way. He never once looked away, not from the pain, not from the evidence, not from me. He kept repeating, "You don't have to face this alone." Not anymore. But the hardest part was still to come, speaking the truth out loud. When the trial began 3 months later, the courtroom was overflowing. It was summer in Oak Hollow, but the heat inside that courthouse had nothing to do with weather. The benches creaked with weight, not just of people, but of shame, of fear, of curiosity. At the front, my grandfather sat stiff and silent. His white hair was neatly combed. His hands folded on the table like he was attending a church service. Not a criminal hearing. His lawyers were the best money could buy. They argued that I was emotional, confused, perhaps overwhelmed on my wedding day. She had too much to drink, one of them insisted. What bride doesn't feel faint under pressure? She misunderstood his care, another said. Ezekiel Carter is a family man. He's a grandfather. A respected figure. They paraded photos, community awards, letters of character. A lifetime of good deeds laid out like a shield. But the evidence was stronger. The toxicology report, the gynecological exam, the locked bedroom door, and most of all my voice. I took the stand with trembling legs. I was no longer paralyzed. but the memory still made my limbs shake. My hands clutched the railing. My throat was dry. But I spoke. I loved him, I said plainly. I trusted him. He was my hero. I paused. The courtroom was silent. And that's what made it so easy for him to hurt me. Because no one ever questioned his kindness. I told them about the champagne. About how the room spun. About how I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. About the way he whispered to me. The words that twisted everything I thought I knew about love and family. The courtroom gasped. But I didn't flinch. I had spent too long locked in silence. I wasn't going back. Then, Grandma Hattie took the stand. The judge asked her to state her name, her age. She stood tall at 67, her pearl necklace trembling slightly against her blouse. "I'm the wife of the accused," she said, and the courtroom held its breath. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. But she looked that jury dead in the eye and said, "I've been married to a monster for 48 years. And I stayed quiet. I regret every second of it." She told them about the past. About the daughters. About her own mother. About the night she found a young me asleep in the guest room, years earlier, with my grandfather sitting beside the bed far too long. "I told myself he was just being affectionate," she said. But deep down I knew. Her testimony cracked the dam. More women came forward. A woman named Delilah Grace, who had been a church assistant in her teens. She said he cornered her in the supply closet after a Wednesday night Bible study. Another woman, Lorraine Tyler, said she'd been molested at 14 while cleaning the Carter estate with her mother. They all said the same thing. No one would have believed us. But now they did. Now we weren't alone. My grandfather's defense team tried to push back. Tried to poke holes in timelines. Discredit the women. But the mountain of truth was too high to climb. The prosecutor gave his closing statement with a quiet rage. "This isn't just about one girl in a white dress," he said. "This is about decades of darkness hidden behind Sunday smiles and community potlucks. This is about what happens when we idolize power more than we protect innocence." The jury deliberated for just 3 hours. When they returned, the room held its breath. "Guilty," the foreman said. "On all counts." The judge sentenced Ezekiel Carter to 20 years in prison for aggravated sexual assault, use of a controlled substance in commission of a felony, statutory rape, criminal abuse of power. At 74, he would die behind bars. He didn't speak at sentencing, didn't apologize, just stared at me one last time, his eyes hollow. And I, standing tall in the courtroom, no longer that frozen girl in a white dress, stared right back. He didn't haunt me anymore. That night, Thomas and I sat outside under the stars. Neither of us said much. He held my hand, calloused and steady. Finally, he whispered, "We're free now." I looked at him, at the man who fought beside me, who believed me when others doubted. "No," I said gently. "Not yet. But we're getting there." The gavel fell. The sentence was set. The monster was behind bars. But no one tells you what to do after justice is served. They don't explain how to wake up the next morning and face the same sunrise you did the day before, only now. Your heart carries the weight of a war you never asked for. I went home as a free woman. But I still felt like a prisoner. Every room in our house had a shadow in it. The wedding photo on the mantel made me flinch. The white dress, carefully stored in a cedar chest, felt like a ghost I couldn't bury. Thomas and I packed up and left Oak Hollow just 2 years after the trial. The town had changed, but not enough. Some people offered quiet apologies in grocery store aisles or left baskets of fruit on our porch without names. Others avoided eye contact, like my pain was contagious. And then there were those who still whispered behind their curtains, too proud or too blind to admit they'd once called a predator a saint. We moved to Richmond, a bigger city, a quieter life. There, we weren't the newlyweds with a scandal. We were just Evelyn and Thomas Carter, two people trying to rebuild something real out of something ruined. It wasn't easy. I had nightmares for years, waking up drenched in sweat, gasping, paralyzed all over again. Sometimes I'd scream without knowing I was screaming. Sometimes I'd go silent for hours, afraid my voice might betray me again. But Thomas, oh Thomas, he never let go. When I trembled, he held me. When I panicked, he waited. When I couldn't speak, he listened anyway. You don't have to be okay, he would say. You just have to be honest. We started therapy together. Then I went on my own. For 2 years, I sat in a chair across from Dr. Maddox, a kind, middle-aged psychologist who didn't flinch when I told her everything. She taught me how to name the pain, how to reclaim my voice, how to own my story. In 1978, I gave birth to our first child, Samuel Thomas Carter. When I held him in my arms, I cried like I hadn't cried since that night in the farmhouse. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized something. Life still had light left in it. Sam had Thomas's steady eyes and my stubborn smile. He was joy wrapped in skin. 2 years later came Caroline, a firecracker with wild curls and a laugh that could chase away any storm. They saved me in ways I'll never fully understand. They gave me purpose, gave me a reason to believe that love, real, gentle, safe love, could still exist in this world. As the kids grew, I returned to school and became a teacher. At 35, I walked into my first classroom with shaking knees and a heart full of hope. Every time I looked into the eyes of a student, I promised myself, if I ever see what no one saw in me, I will speak. And I did. Over my career, I reported 5 cases of abuse. 5 children who were scared, quiet, and hiding something behind their drawings and silence. 5 children who were believed, because I knew the signs. Because I refused to let another child carry what I carried. In 2008, I retired from teaching. That same year, I founded a small support group for women like me. We met every Thursday in the church basement off Elm Street. At first, it was just me and 3 women, nervous, guarded, unsure. But slowly, the circle grew. We called it New Roots, because sometimes you can't go back and heal the tree. You just have to grow new ones. Over the next 15 years, we helped over 150 women tell their stories for the first time. Women who were hurt by fathers, uncles, brothers, bosses, teachers. Women who thought they were alone. Women who learned they weren't. Every time I looked into their eyes, I saw myself at 17, terrified, ashamed, numb. But every session ended the same, with truth spoken out loud. And that was freedom. Thomas passed away in 2020. Complications from diabetes. We'd been married 45 years. Losing him felt like someone had scooped out my lungs and left me trying to breathe anyway. He had carried me when I was broken, held my truth when it was too heavy for me to lift. And when I buried him, I buried a part of myself too. But I also remembered what he always said. Your voice is your legacy. So I kept talking. At the urging of my grandkids, I began sharing my story online. What started as a simple video recorded on a phone became something far greater. Women from every corner of the country began to comment. Messages poured in. Your story gave me the courage to leave. I've never told anyone. Until now. You saved my life. I didn't save anyone. I just told the truth. And I made space for others to do the same. Now, I'm 69 years old. I live alone in a small house filled with photos, plants, and quiet peace. Some mornings, I still wake up crying. But most days, I wake up grateful. Grateful that I'm still here. Grateful that he didn't win. Grateful that the girl in the wedding dress found her way back. Because I did. Piece by piece. Tear by tear. Word by word. And if you're listening to this, if you've made it to the end of my story, then maybe, just maybe, this is the start of your healing too. If you've been hurt, I want you to hear me now. You are not crazy. You are not alone. You are not broken beyond repair. What was done to you does not define you. Your scars are not shameful, they are proof that you survived. Speak. Shout. Whisper if you have to. But do not let the silence win. Because silence is how monsters live. But the truth? Truth sets generations free. If my story touched your heart, please leave a like so more women can find this video. Subscribe to GranDiaries and share where you're watching from in the comments. Each name, each voice, each click. It reminds me that we are not alone. Together, we are building something louder than fear. Together, we are breaking every chain they try to place around us. Together, we rise.